You have stepped into Reader's Labyrinth. And here is your host, Frank Shumpert.
Hey there, if you're watching this on YouTube, please give it a like and hit that subscribe button. It helps me reach a wider audience. Thanks for stopping by.
So, Yuval Kordov, welcome to Reader's Labyrinth, sir. How you doing?
I am doing good. Happy to be here.
Awesome. And where is here for you? I am coming live from South Carolina, where I think we've gotten a little bit of some smoke from your brush fires.
Oh, is it? Yeah, sure. Keep blaming Canada for that, right? Mm-hmm.
And for all of my listeners on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, if you can scroll down to the show notes, my viewers on YouTube, I want you to stop right now and go by Amazon and check this book out. If you're on YouTube or Spotify, you can see me holding it up. Look at that cover. Look how cool that is. And it's not a too intimidating read. I want my viewers to realize this. It's a relatively, in my opinion, a short book. I mean, I have some other tomes over here that I'm currently going through. This is a post-apocalyptic science fiction mystery thriller, The Hand of God. And let me tell my listeners and viewers, this is definitely going to be Frank Shumpert's one of my top 5 all favorite books this year. And I have a little bit of a teaser about our author towards the end. He's going to let us know maybe about what's coming up. Maybe he won't. I'm not quite sure. But before we jump in, I'm going to let the listeners and viewers know that there's going to be some major spoiler events happening in the Hand of God. One thing that I like to do here on Reader's Labyrinth is actually read my guest work. I like to go through it, highlight it. I'm trying to find, you see, and this is proof. I don't know if you can see the highlight on camera. It's proof.
That's commitment.
That is commitment. And
some would call it heresy, but that's commitment.
I know. Oh man, that's right. My secret's out. Although I leave the cover as pristine as I possibly can. Nice. I like to leave the cover unbladed as it was. But one thing that I love about a book, the format, is you can physically engage with the knowledge and with the imagination. And I've always been like that. I've always committed heresy against books. But then again, they've always lived with me, and the author has always lived with me as well. That's kind of, I feel like a little piece of their imagination is with me. So with that being said, guys, there will be spoiler alerts. So if you're one of those people that just need to, we're not going to hit all of the plot highlights. So I'm not going to give you the entire arc of the Hand of God, but I am going to ask some questions of our author, of Yuval Kordov, and it may kind of dampen the experience for you. So what I would advise is just go ahead and buy this book, read it for yourself, leave him a 5-star review on Amazon, and leave him a review on Goodreads as well. You can follow my example.
All great advice. Absolutely.
You heard it from the man himself. That's it. I'm the one that's telling you to do it. So without further ado, and with that warning out of the way, with the book at my hand, I'm going to ask our author guest a couple of questions. So, Yuval, are you all ready, sir?
I'm here. We'll see how it goes. Yeah. Don't ask me what my book is about, because that's the hardest question to answer.
That you know what? That's a crummy question too. What is your what's your book about? Like, if Frank Herbert was sitting here and you asked him what is his book about, Well, yeah. You know what? Maybe that's why he was always kind of short with the people who were asking him questions, because they were going for the what's your favorite color kind of stuff. But this is not what Reader's Labyrinth is about. Oh no, we are the meat grinder of getting into the book over what makes it click. But before we do that, for my listeners and viewers, I'm going to ask Yuval a little bit about his background. So for our first question, it's going to be, what was your childhood like growing up?
Oh, wow. This is like psychoanalysis.
These types of questions help me understand certain parts, I think. Yes, and it's all going to tie together. Maybe I could be deadly wrong, but this is a question, when I was reading it, it kept popping up in my mind. I'm like, I wonder what his childhood was like. What did he do for fun? Yeah, so.
Yeah, I mean, I was, just a fat nerd living a fat nerd life, um, playing with my toys, watching my Saturday morning cartoons, and reading a lot and playing early video games. You know, all of which probably have influenced me throughout my life. The early RPGs, in particular, like Fallout and Planescape and Baldur's Gate and all the classics. Yeah, I you know played them on my good old Apple IIe and then my Amigas, and kind of got into the computer thing early. It was fun. Ran a BBS on my 300 baud modem while my parents were sleeping. So yeah, it was a good time. The 80s were fun. 80s and 90s were fun.
That is so cool. And so whenever I was growing up, it was more in the '90s. So I was playing stuff like the DOS version of TIE Fighter. I was playing the RTS games like Total Annihilation, StarCraft, and stuff like that.
Mm.
Uh, but the story aspect is what I was always really, really just down for. Especially in StarCraft and Total Annihilation, which Total Annihilation is getting more and more closer to reality, I think, with like the ARM and the core and the artificial intelligence that's been coming up. Speaking of which, I think that you've got some AI that's going to be making an appearance here. But
Yeah.
um,
StarCraft was great, man. I do you remember those like cinematics at the
oh
time?
yes, I
There's
do.
nothing
Oh
else like that, right? It was
yeah,
crazy.
yeah, yeah, I do. Oh man. And there was that one scene where like the Space Marines had like boarded some station, and there were these Zerg, and at the very end, like the Ghost, he blows the station up, and he blows them up too. Oh man, I still remember that. But
Wasn't
what a geek out! I love it.
StarCraft originally supposed to be like a Warhammer 40K game, and that's why there were Space Marines, and then they didn't get the license or something, so they just built their own IP. Like, wasn't that the story
So
about
yeah,
StarCraft? Or am I making that up?
I was listening to a podcast on StarCraft, and so they were talking with one of the developers of it. And he said that yes, it originally started as a Warhammer spinoff, but workshop studios, they wouldn't give them the license for it, and so the Space Marines and a bunch of that other stuff kind of bled over into it. But like the
Yeah.
Zerg were supposed to represent the Tyranids, and I'm trying to think
Mhm.
back to
Yep.
Warhammer 40K whenever I was in high school here, but
And the Protoss were like the Tau
that's
or
right.
something.
That's right. The Tau, the Eldar, and stuff like that, or the Dark Eldar, I guess. Well, you even
Yeah, yeah,
have the Dark Protoss as well in StarCraft 2. So I guess there really is more of a tie-in, I guess, with that. So
yeah,
that's pretty
yeah.
cool.
I played StarCraft for sure. I played a lot of video games
Mhm.
growing up, but mostly, I mean, no surprise, like mostly RPGs, like Bard's Tale and Might and Magic, and yeah, everything that the old original studios put out, like Icewind Dale, all those
Icewind
classics.
Dale,
They're just
yeah, yeah. Okay,
yeah.
all right. So what was it about the RPGs that attracted you so much? Was it the world building aspect? Was it the just getting into the character of it?
Yeah, it just kind of happened. I don't even remember. I mean, that was way too long ago, but I don't remember how I would have gotten into it. Um, it just happened to be the games that I played, and at the time there were a lot, right? Like in those early like Apple IIe days, and Amiga gaming, eventually PC gaming. There's just a lot of the games coming out were either pure arcade, or they were these really deep immersive RPGs, and those are the ones that just compelled me. Um, and some of them I'll never forget, like Planescape Torment, which I've mentioned a few times on my Twitter account. Was this? Are you familiar with it?
So I knew some guys who played it. I never got into it myself though. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I
So
mean, I'm
you
familiar with it.
basically
Yeah.
Planescape was one of my favorite D&D settings. There was basically like cross planar travel. There was elemental planes, and um, this city that existed at the center of all the planes, which whose name I'm blanking on right now, which is embarrassing. But Planescape Torment came out, and you basically play this guy who wakes up. it sounds cliche now, but you wake up with amnesia, you don't know who you are. And it's very fantastical because, you're partnering up with demons and all kinds of creatures to find out who you are and how you got there and what your history is. And you eventually discover that you're this like horrible person. And even back then, they were building video games that had multiple endings, right? This would have been, Black Isle Studios? Was it them or was it Interplay? I'm blanking on the original guys who are now like in exile, Obsidian, doing those games. But at the end of it, there were multiple endings, and I think I got. Are we? Am I allowed to swear on this show?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Sure.
I got the shittiest ending you can imagine, basically from what I remember. But there was a question at the end, and hopefully I'm not butchering it because it's etched in my memory. Where at the end of the game, I basically ended up in hell, and I pick up a weapon because in this setting there's the blood war, which is an eternal war between devils, which were lawful evil, and demons, chaotic evil, which sounds very semantic to normal people, but they were having this eternal war. And so in the game at the end, I ended up in hell, and I pick up a weapon, and then this narrator comes on and says something along the lines of, "What can change the nature of a man? Nothing. Nothing can change the nature of a man." And I probably played this when I was like, I don't know, like this was actually a later one. I think this was like 1990 or 92 or something. So I would have been like late teens, but it was like my mind just exploded, and probably I was damaged for life ever since the ending of that game, and that probably has influenced my my creative endeavors ever since.
That's so awesome. It's almost like the spirit of Joseph Conrad like reached up into the game, and it's like what can contain the nature of a man, and it's like it just gives you this just bleakness, like this nihilistic view of like reality that's just overbearing. I love it.
Yeah,
And
I mean, games are
yeah,
really
that's so
cool. I
cool.
mean,
Yeah.
there are still good games ish, but back then, I mean, you didn't have as much opportunity with graphics and visual immersion, so they were all about concept and story and character interaction and NPCs, and it's just like everything's rose-colored
Mhm.
glasses. But I loved it. I loved those games. I loved playing them. It was a good time.
I really miss the community, like getting up with friends and playing a good, this tabletop game and just kind of letting time just go, sink down for a couple of hours. And as a matter of fact,
Yeah.
I had a really good friend. We used to play, the Arkham Horror, which was a H.P. Lovecraft, a tabletop game.
Mhm.
And we would put on some 1930s music that was like some jazzy kind of stuff, and he had a little
Awesome.
track that was playing a thunderstorm, and we would play it. And those were some of the most just a liminal time, and it's like, hey, you know what, the world, maybe there is a chance that it's really enchanted. So
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, playing actual RPGs was a big influence too, right? I mean, I played a ton of D&D, growing up. I would buy every new RPG that came out, even if I didn't have people to play it with. Um, but yeah, I would say my two main kind of gaming influences would be, I mean, not surprising with a book, would be like D&D and BattleTech, and I got both into both of
BattleTech,
those,
yeah. Okay.
a solid 30 years ago. And yeah, it's great. I have a huge appreciation for anything that gets people together in person, having these experiences together. Whether story is great, but even if you're playing like a war game, if you're playing like a BattleTech scenario, there's just something about doing it in person. It's just such a special experience. And yeah, now like kids and everything else, like what I'm finding myself doing, my oldest, she's 9, so I'm steadily getting her into more and more complicated board games, because there's going to be that inevitability where I'll hit that inflection point and be like, girls, let's play so and so board game, and I'll have people to play board games with, and it just happens to be my children, right? So it's kind of it's funny the way things go, that transition from having those experiences with your friends to having them with your own family.
Well, I certainly hope to have it myself. I have kids, like we were talking and all, so that's definitely something I'd like to pass on to them. So, whenever you were growing up, you've all, we were talking about games and RPGs and all. What role did books play, if any, whenever you were coming up?
Oh yeah, it's huge. I mean, I was actually it's funny. I was looking for some books for my older daughter the other day, and she had picked up a random choose your own adventure from the library. I loved choose your own adventure books.
Oh yeah,
And I was like,
yeah,
oh, hold on a second. And I had this flashback to there was this series of choose your own adventures called, I think it was Fighting Fantasy. And it was like a single player RPG in a book. And so it would be
totally
choose your
cool.
own
Yeah,
adventure. What's that?
I said that's totally cool.
Yeah,
So
it was
yeah,
so cool because normal choose your own adventure. It's like, are you going to go here, go here? You pick your page, but in this case, you would actually have inventory. You would roll dice. You would have a character sheet. So it was like it was just the coolest concept of a. It's funny. I just got a little chill that like thinking back to this. Right, these are the pivotal things. You have this RPG for one in book format, and yeah, they were really cool. So there was Fighting Fantasy. There was a few others. I played the hell out of those, and yeah, I got into fantasy early. I read all the typical books that you read in school growing up, and it was good. Um, but when it came down, and it's funny because again, I don't know why I started in fantasy and sci-fi. It's probably like a family influence I just don't remember, maybe from my older brother or my sister or something like that. But um, the books I remember the most as the starting point of this journey would be Dragonlance by Weiss and Hickman. I don't remember how old I was when I read them, probably around 14 or 15. And again, like shattered me. There's some emotional stuff in there, great stories, great world. It had a tie-in into D&D, so that worked. And yeah, it just really didn't stop from that point. So um, yeah, but I fond memories of those fighting fantasy books. I looked them up the other day, and I think they might actually still be available in like whatever reprint they are. So yeah, pretty cool.
all right, we are going pretty good on this.
This
What
is great.
book? Yeah, what book, person, or experience, or perhaps trauma, would you say has had the biggest impact as far as your intellectual development is concerned?
Holy cow, that's a question.
Dun dun dun. I would add some music, but YouTube would just come right along and strike this
Yeah,
video. They have turned into
freaking,
fascists with music.
it's
You have to
freaking
be
villain.
careful.
Um, it'd probably be the same answer. Like all of those things that I immersed myself in early stuck. Um, whether it was Fallout and then Fallout 2 and then Wasteland and then Wasteland 2 and then Wasteland 3, right? Like those guys, you know, it's so cool that these game developers and these creatives that you grow up with keep doing it, right? So, when Wasteland 2 or is it Wasteland 3, both of them came out, it's just very exciting to be able to go back into that world and to remember why you love those things that much. But yeah, like I think a lot of those early game experiences um, probably started to push me in the direction of, the post-apocalyptic, kind of these dystopias, and of course all of the amazing movies in the 80s and 90s. Like 1986 is the best year of movies of all
Well,
time. I
for
mean,
sure. Yeah, yeah.
like everything came out in 1986, right? There was like Aliens, Big Trouble in Little China, like Terminator 2, or I can't remember. Like, so it all just commingles and makes just does its thing in background processes, and then one day you're like, oh, I can do creative things too. And it's just the
Hmm.
commingling of all these ideas and these archetypes and the state of the world where you're at when you are doing the writing. But yeah, probably all those same early things.
Well, you know what Jack Burton always said.
Such a good movie,
that
man.
that was, oh man,
I love Kurt Russell so much.
I
Like,
know, and the movie was made for him. I mean
yeah.
that, yeah, yeah.
We
So,
watched Soldier the other day. Have you seen
oh
Soldier?
yes, yes, I have, yeah, yeah, I
So
saw that.
good.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it
What are you
was.
going to do, sir? What are you going to do? I'm going to kill them all, sir. Like, it's
Yeah,
just
I'm gonna
like,
kill
it's
him.
amazing.
Yeah,
Like, it just,
I love it. I
yeah,
love it.
yeah, yeah. Punching gas tanks. It was
Oh man, I
perfect.
know.
Yeah,
I mean, it had everything in it that would cause someone to walk away from it or to stick with it for life. I mean,
yeah.
everything was there for the for the notes. At
And
least for
supposedly
me.
it's in the
So.
same universe as Blade Runner. I don't know if that's like just
Hmm.
a
Hmm.
running
Yeah.
urban fiction, but
Yeah.
I keep hearing that. But yeah, yeah.
I've heard that John Carpenter's The Thing was in the same universe as, and I may be stretching here if I can remember. It was a tweet, but supposedly it's in the same like vein as either Warhammer or there was something else that sounded more plausible.
Hmm.
Um, it may have been Doom. I don't know. Maybe Doom. Might
Terrifying
be.
movie thing.
Yes, yes, absolutely. A relentless movie. If you could distill a philosophy down into a monster, it would be The Thing. Oh my gosh. I mean, that thing, a monster without form. I mean, there's so much that someone could go off of on that.
And that's another influence, right? Is like, I don't know if it was the same for you, but growing up, like I wasn't necessarily as sheltered from some of the movies that maybe I should have
Oh, I
been
know.
sheltered.
Yeah.
Right? Like even like like Aliens, like horror movies. Like I remember my first horror movie, like sitting in. I was having a sleepover at my friend's house, and they had Super Channel back in the day, which was a great channel because it had like a guaranteed nudity after like midnight, so it was perfect for us. And all the horror movies, and I don't know if we were planning to watch it, but Prince of Darkness came on, and I was
Oh, yeah, yeah.
shit. And to this day, like there's some artists, like some music artists, who still sample some of the segments from Prince of Darkness when there's the voice from the year 1999 in the future. Um, and yeah, so I just think back to those things that I would have experienced with a fairly innocent mind, and yeah, lo and behold,
I
here's
was
what happened.
in I was in third grade when I saw the movie The Howling, um, based on Gary Brandener's book, and I thought this was the most terrifying movie in the whole freaking world. It scared the shit out of me. I mean, I
Yeah,
was scared to go to bed at night. I was so scared of werewolves after that, but it really kind of gave me pause. And there
yeah,
were some juicy scenes in there as well, but boy, you had to work to get to them. You had to get through a whole lot of fear if you wanted that. So,
yeah. And even
oh
some of
man.
this, well, I actually grew up in the UK until I was 9 or 10, and we moved to
Mhm.
Canada. And even thinking about the TV I was watching then, like it was like Day of the Triffids, or like
Oh
War of
yeah.
the Worlds, or these other very classic things, that Invasion of the Body Snatchers, like terrifying, insanely terrifying stuff. Like not just visually, but conceptually, because like as a young person, these are the first times that you're thinking about these notions of, oh my god, that could happen. Aliens could come here, they could take over people's bodies, and nobody would know, and then there'd be nobody left. And this is the first time you're having this idea, and it's absolutely mind-blowing, right? So yeah, 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 early exposure.
War of the Worlds kind of has like a quiet terror to it because so much of it is happening in the far off distance. Like, especially the 1950 version of it or
Mhm.
54 version, I think. Like the old black and white, the meteor crashes way over there. They're looking through the binoculars and they see the Martian war machines and that green light that's coming up. But what was so odd about it is the Martian war machines were always over there coming to you, to
Yeah,
wherever you are. And like there was this relentless feeling of being pursued throughout the entire movie. And I didn't intellectually grasp that as a kid, but I felt it in my bones. I was like, the Martians are coming. The
yeah,
Martians are coming. And there was that scene where attention, attention, the Martians are coming, and they were ordering everyone to evacuate, and just seeing how scared all the adults were. I mean, that gave
Mhm.
me some serious nightmares as a kid. But
Well, it's the perfect
I mean, it was
example of,
good.
people talk about world building and writing and like whether you should have like soft or hard world building and stuff like that. And it kind of makes me think of that. It's like stuff is happening, it's terrifying, but you're not right in the middle of the stuff, right? You are
Yeah,
in a
yeah.
world affected by the stuff and you're seeing bits and pieces of it, and every bit and piece is terrifying, right? And it just builds up this bubbling menace.
Yeah, for sure. And as a matter of fact, speaking of a bubbling menace with tentacles, man, I can't wait to get into your book here. So I think I'm going to go to, before we dive into the hand of God, can you let our viewers and listeners know about the Dark Legacies as an origin of your novel? And I say
Oh
that
yeah.
because at the very top it has Dark Legacies in it. So
Yeah, so it's funny. Like I've been a bit gun shy on this, um, because, well, yeah. Let me get into it, I guess. So back in the day, around 2000, early 2000s, D&D did the open gaming license. So they did, they released the D20 system, and it was fairly revolutionary because basically it meant that if you are a creative person, you can now go and create your own campaign settings and modules and rule books and everything based on the open gaming license, based on the D20 system. So anybody who knows how to play D&D could pick up your book as a campaign setting, um, and it was just an amazing opportunity for folks to break into that market. And now, I mean, 99% of D&D material is third party material, right? There's been a whole hubbub with the OGL changing and everything, but so anyways, back in that time, I was like, okay, this is cool, like maybe I can get into this. And I was still playing a bit, and just very, like, I before that, like I used to like write poetry, and like I produce music. I've just done a lot of different creative things in my life. It's just I have to be doing creative things, or I just get depressed. So I was like, I'm just going to release some D&D books, and I had some ideas at the time around an original setting that was still fantasy, but it was fantasy in post-apocalyptic Earth. And I don't know that anything existed like that at the time. This was, again, like around 2002. And I just went for it. So I was like, I'm going to create a setting that is post apocalyptic Earth. The world has fallen into hell. It's monotheistic. So it's just God. It's not a pantheon. There are, different, because typically in D&D, it's a pantheon, right? There's like the god of this, god of this, god of this. I was like, how can we make this different? Let's make it a little bit more representative of, a fantasy, uh, intersected with like what, like a standard post-apocalyptic scenario might be. And it was fun. It was great. I at the time, that setting was actually based in Europe. So if you were to look at the old Dark Legacies map, you'll actually see some familiar continental shapes there, although most of the world is in hell. And it was cool. It was a really fun experience. I worked with some amazing artists. I worked with Adrian Smith, who is famous for his work, particularly with Games Workshop. Um, I, you know, I had made a little bit of money after a company I worked for sold. Like I think I made like 10 or 20K, and I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm just gonna spend it and make my dream come true. Because Adrian
awesome,
was not a cheap
awesome.
artist, even
Yeah.
at the time, right? Um, but I was like,
Is
I have this.
Adrian, not to cut you off, is he the
Yeah.
guy who did the book cover for this?
No, no,
Oh, oh,
no.
he did
Um,
the maps, right? Or the
he only did the stuff on what we're talking about now. The stuff I did like 20 years ago.
oh, for your Dark Legacies.
Yeah, for
Okay,
Dark
yeah.
Legacies. So
Okay,
yeah, so I went to him. I went to a few other artists. I got a little bit of help from a couple other writers, and I made a campaign setting, and I released two books, the Dark Legacies Player's Guide and Campaign Guide. and it was super fun. I got like international distribution, sold it all over the place. It did okay. And then I ran out of money basically. And I just decided to let it go. So that was kind of like around 2007. Um, but I always had this idea of I would love one day to reboot this into a science fiction kind of a setting. And I played with it over the years because there's a version of D20 called D20 Modern. So I played with it over the years, and I was like, how could I change this to be something that's a bit more traditional post-apocalyptic, but still with these themes of this will sound familiar. Actually, one of the original themes in this Dark Legacies from the D&D setting was basically the devil was present, not named as such, but there was this character, this adversary that was present on the earth, that was responsible for its destruction, that had adherents and followers, and was actually the origin of magic. So magic in the setting was completely evil. It was actually the deconstructed body of primordial evil. That was the nature of magic. And if you used magic, you went insane, basically. So a lot of kind of Lovecraftian notions there. Or horrible things would happen. You tear holes in space and time. But at the same time, most of civilization was based on faith in God and faith in their religious institutions. And yet, where there is proof of the adversary, there is no proof of God. So that is one of the core themes that kind of stuck with me. How do you have faith in goodness and what's right and what's moral in the absence of proof? I mean, that's the definition of faith, right? Is belief in the absence of proof, in the absence of evidence. So that carried through. Plus a bunch of other things. It's actually the Scavrats. I could show you the book from 2004 where there's a section detailing the Scavrats. So they were actually
so cool. Yeah.
Yeah, they were kind of like a bit organization. They were very similar to what they are in the novels. But it is fun. So every once in a while, I'll do a Twitter post that's like, "Hey, look at this thing I wrote 20 years ago. Sound familiar?" So it kind of carried along and along, and then a very random thing happened where about 5 years ago or more, my parents bought my older daughter a Lego set, and something just clicked in me. It was very, very strange and very random because I played with tons of Lego growing up, and I invented my own stuff, and I took pictures of it, and I never would build the sets. I'd buy the sets and then just build something else. And my parents got my daughter this Lego set, and at the same time, I was working in a shared working space, and every July 4th they would have the, May the 4th be with you, and they would give everybody these little, like, kind of just these tiny Lego sets, these kind of just like gift sets, right? So I'd accumulated a few of these, and I was like, huh. And I took her kit and I made a mech out of it because I've always loved mechs. Right? This is the thing a dad's going to do when his daughter gets a Lego set.
I like it.
Right? So these are the things that for some reason have stuck in my head, like BattleTech, like Macross, Robotech, all of these things. And I was like, huh. And I don't remember what the follow-up triggers were, but then I started buying some Lego sets that had a lot of black parts. And I was like, okay, I'm going to try to make a bigger mech and a bigger mech and a bigger mech. And I just started doing this. And then I got good at it. And I was like, okay, I'm going to keep doing this. So I actually found this site called Bricklink, which is effectively a global marketplace where people sell used Lego parts. And to somebody who may not know that up front, they're like, that's the weirdest thing I've ever heard of. But if I was to, maybe I'll try it. We'll see if this works. If I was to turn my camera around.
Yeah. Okay.
This is all Lego parts. And I just started.
That is totally awesome. By the way, that's
doing it,
totally
and then
cool.
was like, okay, well, but what's the story behind this? And then this character showed up. Um, very,
Oh no, Rebecca 6, no.
you know,
No.
it's so funny.
Yeah.
And yeah, like I just made this out of random parts 5 years ago, and then I was like, okay, there's this story here, this story here, and then I joined Instagram, as a person does when they have random things to share, and I just found that as I was posting things, um, I was writing more story accompanying them, and then I realized what I was doing is I was recreating Dark Legacies through Lego, um, particularly these mechs, which became very large. So the mech on the cover of my book is actually a Lego model.
Oh,
Um,
cool. Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I posted it on my Twitter.
I'm
But if you
like
guys go
staring at it
to
now. Yeah.
Instagram.com/gothbricks2000, that's my Lego page.
And I will put
Um,
a link in the show notes too. So, yeah.
yeah, it might be fun because if you look at it from the beginning, you can almost see like the evolution of my brain as I'm sorting out what the hell I'm doing. Um, and the story just emerged from there. And then a couple years ago, or I guess more than a couple years ago now, my wife was like, well, why don't you write a book? And I was like, how am I going to write a book? Like, I have a hard job, we have kids, I'm exhausted, I can't write a book. And then I started writing a book, and then I wrote a book, and it kind of just happened. And I would do these very dramatic stories in Instagram because it's fun. You can add music, you can add effects. So I was doing a lot of these kind of like Instagram stories where I would have like these vignettes and very dark ambient music talking about Rebecca 6 and the sisterhood and Bastion and this and that, and it all kind of came together. And then yeah, I wrote the book, and now I don't have time for Lego anymore, which is too bad because it's a fun hobby. But you can only really, you have kids, you know how that goes. You can basically have one hobby, right?
That's
Um,
right. Yeah. And that is
so
stretching it
that's
too.
that's like the
Mhm.
very random story of how I went from writing a D&D setting 20 years ago to writing a book last year.
What I like about your story is that you have a very curious mind and you'll just follow your curiosities and then it just leads you down these holes. And it's like, hey, I'm going to do a Dark Legacies RPG and then Legos and then book writing and then, and then the Instagram. And it's like, bang. And now we have this wonderful book in front of us. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's
that's
fun.
so
I
cool.
love
Yeah.
it. And I spent a lot of time with music. Like I used to have a lot of synths and samplers and like analog effects machines, and that was a really good time. Um, it's something maybe I would get back into one day, but I don't know. I mean, there's a lot of it. That's kind of the barrier to curiosity. Curiosity, is great, and then it runs up against the saturation barrier of, oh, why
Oh,
don't I do
yeah.
this? And
Yeah.
then you realize, oh, there's already a million people doing that, and probably better than I ever could, right? So that would probably be the thing that would keep me from getting back into music. There's a lot of amazing music. Love it.
Well, I am not one of the people that makes amazing music, so you don't have to worry about me. And speaking of music, oh my gosh, like, so I was trying to find some music for my podcast and my YouTube channel, and I just kept running up against one copyright barrier after another because, like, if I pay someone to produce some music for me, then they still hold the copyright. And if they upload that, because they want to world, to see what kind of music that they can make, if YouTube sees that they have uploaded the same music as me, they'll actually give me a copyright strike. And
Yeah.
it's like the most weird thing. So what I've started doing is I've had to fire up my garage band and just try and,
All
just
right.
play around with stuff. And I'm like, look, this isn't going to sound good. It's not a professional, but no one is going to copyright strike me. And it isn't the artist either. I mean, it's the algorithm just
Yeah.
identifying that there's two songs and they're similar. Okay, which one of these? And then the algorithm will come after you, like the war of the worlds. It's just slowly coming.
The thing that I found, so I have a YouTube channel as well, but again, it's a Lego related one, kind of giving kind of like engineering tips on how to build these
Oh, cool.
these big
Yeah.
mechs. So what I actually did is I went to a few of my favorite artists and record labels, and I basically asked for permission to use their music. But what actually happens is you do that, you don't get a copyright strike, but if you're monetized, which I never was, I never got enough viewership, they basically claim all of the monetization because their music is being used. So it's, you can do it if you don't care about making money off of YouTube. But yeah, it feels like, like that's actually, I'm not a fan of Meta, but that one thing I really love about Instagram is whether it's a story or a reel, you just put music on it, and hopefully those artists are being compensated.
That
right?
is cool. Mm-hmm.
That I imagine there's like a licensing or a streaming arrangement in the background. They're being compensated, and I wonder why doesn't YouTube just do the same thing? It's such an ordeal to create a composition between your video and your music and your presentation, and it really shouldn't be. Just put in royalties and pay artists if somebody uses their music, and you're done, right?
100%. As a matter of fact, I have to give a shout out to Brian Penny, who I had on 2 guests ago, and he's the one who warned me about the music on YouTube. I didn't listen to him, so I had to learn the hard way. But these are all great answers. I don't know if my questions are too good, but I'm loving your answers 100%, Yuval. And so I would like to hold this up as I read out the next question then. Are you ready? So I'm going to let our viewers, and if you are on the podcast, feel free to switch on over to Spotify, or you can go on YouTube and look at it. I'm going to move my little finger here. So they say, never judge a book by its cover. However, guilty as charged on my end. The cover art for your novel is fucking fantastic. So there's our big F-bomb right there. There's your permission to cuss.
It's ruined. Right. No kids. Watch this.
No kids. Well, I actually marked my video as no kids because it limits its reach so much. But with that being said, the font of the title, the blend of the reds, and I just want my viewers to see it again. I think the font is awesome. What a great decision. The way the reds, the orange, I guess that's like a dark blue almost. It's almost a charcoal black up there. I love how everything just swirls together. And the first thing I thought of when I saw your book on Amazon is I thought of Dr. Ernst Reinhardt from the movie The Black Hole, Disney's whispered masterpiece as he is descending into hell.
That's another movie that ruined me as a kid. The ending of that movie?
The hell. Oh my gosh, that's
so
right.
Depressing. Yeah, I actually remember bawling. I remember as a child bawling at the end of The Black Hole. Like
I used to watch the movie because of the sheer beauty of the spaceship and just praying that the asteroids wouldn't destroy it this time. Maybe if I watch it, the asteroids will miss it and Reinhardt can have the shields up or something. But the asteroids just hit this gothic, beautiful structure in space.
Yeah.
But the titles seem to be confronting me personally. So the question is there a story behind the cover art? And what input did you have in its creation? Tell us about it.
Yeah, so what's funny is it's a little bit similar to my other story. So the artist who painted that, his name is Luke Martin, and I found him on Instagram. Basically, what he was doing is he does paint-overs. So I found his profile, and what he was doing is people would paint these beautiful like Warhammer miniatures, and he would actually paint them. Basically, a paint over is when you take a photograph and you paint over it and you add a background and so on and so forth. I was like, oh, this is really cool. And I reached out to him, and we actually did 3 pieces together, 3 collaborations with 3 of my mechs. So the mech on that cover is my favorite one that I've ever designed, and that's Rebecca 6. And I would give him these really detailed, excruciatingly detailed art directions. Now, he's probably like, what is this? Like, I'm just doing an Instagram collaboration, but I was like, I want it to be like in the style of Beksinski, and this is this theme, and imagine like this city that's the lost city, and it's kind of good but evil at the same time, and this mech that has and it's go on and on, right? And he did amazing work. So this was my favorite of the 3 pieces he made. And come book publishing time, I was like, well, fuck it. I'm just going to use this for the cover of my book because it's perfect. Like it is Rebecca 6 standing in front of Cathedral. And we had to do a bit of work because he had originally designed it as a square image for Instagram. But fortunately, he made it high res. And then I worked with a designer who I work with, Victor Platten Jr., who's an amazing guy. And he knew about my writing, and I told him all about the aesthetic. And it's futuristic, but it's fantasy, and it's post-apocalyptic, but it's biblical, and it's gothic, but it's like cyberpunk. And he found this font that was basically perfect. Just had this all of those aspects built into it, right? And the symbol you see there, the sun with the 8 flames, that's actually the original religious symbol of the Baala divinity, which is one of the religious organizations in the original Dark Legacies from 20 years ago. So
how about that?
Iconography has also followed me over the last 20 years.
So that is cool. So can you elaborate on the iconography on that? Like,
yeah. So in the number 8. So numerology is very important in the book. There's a lot of there's a lot of references in the book that probably 0.1% of people will ever get. Some of them are religious, some of them are numerological, et cetera, et cetera. But the number 8 was a big deal in the original Dark Legacies because the faith was the overall just name of the faith. And there were 8 dominions of the faith. And each of those dominions represented a different kind of spiritual facet that comprised the whole. And the 8 flames represented those 8 dominions. And the rising sun was always this kind of like primitive fundamental God imagery, right? The 8 practices of human faith effectively creating a scenario by which salvation may come, and the earth would be pulled out of hell, and God would return, and hell would dissipate, and people would be saved, right? In a very non-denominational kind of way. But so that theme is 100% transplanted into my novel, right? And the reason I said I was a little bit cagey earlier is I've talked to a couple of folks, and they're like, "Oh, I didn't know it was based on a game or this fantasy thing." It's like, well, no, it's not. It's a complete reboot that shares a lot of the same themes that are just themes in my head. So it's funny. It's like, it's cool that there's this history, but don't think that new Dark Legacies is old Dark Legacies. They're completely different. But so that this 8 has continued into the novel, and in the Revenant Sisterhood, which is the dominant faith, this messianic faith in the book, ruled by Esther, the Eternal One, there are 8 Revenant mothers in her inner circle who are the head of the church effectively. So that's where the 8 flames come, and Revenant mothers wear a flame pin on their habits to.
That's right. Yeah. Oh, okay.
And Esther herself actually has, she's portrayed as this very angelic / demonic presence. Stark black. Revenant sisters obviously have like the gray white skin, the purple eyes with the gold and silver. But she wears these golden flames around her like a halo. So I really wanted to incorporate that into the cover, and there was a perfect spot on the arch that Luke Martin, the artist, created. And something that I'm working with my designer on right now is for the second and third books, we may use different symbols. So we may end up using the same one, but the second one, I've been working with him on a new version of something that would represent Bastion, or Bastion's Church of the Legion, or the Triarchy. And in that way, you would have a different symbol for each book that represents a little bit thematically how the narrative flows. But yeah, I'm trying to get Luke for my second book. I'm in the middle of I'm in the middle of shopping around for artists right now. So I talked to Felix, who everybody knows. He's done amazing work. But I'm also talking to Luke again, just because there's a beauty in having the same artist, do your whole series. So he actually followed up with me recently. So hopefully, I can get him to do the second cover. And of course, I learned nothing from my first book and my publication, Trials and Tribulations. So I'm doing everything way too late. But I'm hoping, getting people. I'm hoping, September would be like a cover reveal. So we'll see.
Oh man, I am totally down for that. And whenever, if you ever want to do anything to help try and promote your work or just kind of get the word out, please tag me, message me, and you're welcome to come back on here, especially if you want to give us a teaser or something like that. I'm definitely down for that. But yeah, man, so the cover totally set the mood for me. Like a lot of, I work a full-time job. I have stress. I have stuff in my life. And as I get older, it's becoming more and more difficult to kind of escape to that liminal space that reading has always given me, because it's like, okay, I have to decompress from my work day.
Mm-hmm.
I have to get in contact with that playful, curious side of myself that would love to play with Legos, that would love to build my model of the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea sub. But what I like about the cover is I was able to look at it before I started to read it, for whatever reading session I had. And it kind of put me in the mood for it. I'm like, okay, I'm in the mood. I'm getting sucked into the story now. And I would think about what I read before and I would just jump right into it. So really, really cool. It definitely had like a psychological effect on me. As a matter of fact, yeah, and after this interview, it's going to earn it a little place somewhere here. Nice. I need to get like a bookshelf where I can just kind of...
You do need to get a bookshelf?
Yeah, that's right. It's going to have them on the wall. Look, it just pops so nice. I
it's
can
funny.
see the look from here. It's so cool. Yeah.
I was a bit worried about the cover, and I still am a bit worried about the cover because, obviously the story, so mechs, battle walkers, have a large... part in the story. These are the ancient AI war machines that all went insane. We're doing full spoilers in this, right?
Yeah. Full spoilers.
So they all went insane, mostly killed themselves, and then somehow they appear again, right? And there is importance to that beyond just cool giant robots. The whole way that the numbered and symbiotes work, and destiny that is available to these children of the Revenant Sisterhood who shouldn't even exist. They're a miracle and a curse, and they shouldn't even exist. But the Battle Walkers give them an opportunity to finish the job that Esther and the Revenant Sisterhood failed to finish. And there's great agency there for Rebecca Six and the others, for these young characters. But I was worried because The Hand of God is like a story about people and human experience and human suffering. And my concern was, is somebody going to look at this and think it's like a big stompy action book? Because it's not, right? Mm-hmm. There's not a lot of action in it. When it comes, it's intense and it's like horror action. And it's purposeful and it's brutal because it's not... I mentioned this in my podcast with Offers. I don't portray darkness out of any kind of celebration. It's there because it's a necessary part of growth and experience. But I was really worried, okay, if I'm putting a giant robot in my book, am I selling the book to the wrong people? Who are expecting, like a BattleTech novel, or something along those lines. But I guess we'll see, right? I mean, it's curious to... It would be curious to know. I'd love to do like a survey of people who are in our community, who have a sense of my book, who I am as an author, versus people who would just see it on the spot, and what each of them would think it's about. Both of them, neither of them having read it, but both of them wondering what it's about. and there's going to be a mech on the cover of my second book as well. I've committed to it. So yeah, it's kind of like this this underlying concern I have, but it is what it is. It's
I can say this as a reader is that if this, well, first of all, let me point out some stuff really quick on the cover. I think the colors on the cover itself right here kind of sell the themes and concepts that you're going for. If this were brighter colors, if the mech were more of a prominent position, especially if it was viewed from an angle with like weapons firing or something like that, then I think the expectation would have been that this is going to be a rock'em and sock'em kind of a story. This is what it's going to be. But, this catches the eye before this does. This is almost like, okay, oh shit. I mean, that's almost the reaction
that's
of
awesome.
what I had. Like, okay,
Yeah, it's like,
what the hell is that doing there? What?
It's like the gargoyle that happens to be sitting atop.
Yes, that's it. Yeah, it is.
Yeah. That's awesome. No, I appreciate that. And the red and the orange, like, yeah, that was a big deal. Like, because the world is effectively in hell, adjacent to hell, and I wanted that to come through, and great, that's awesome.
Yeah, man, for sure. So I think that you can put that concern to rest. And man, what a great answer! Like I said, I don't know if I'm asking good questions though. I try, but I think we're starting to tease some good stuff out. Excuse me, pardon me. So for our next question, we are almost an hour in and we're barely halfway. I'm loving it. Are you okay? Do you need a break or anything?
Yeah, all right, my butt cheeks aren't asleep yet. I'm all right.
Okay, cool. So to say that the hand of God has a prologue would be an understatement. I think in your case, we need another term for it because without the prologue, I think a vital part of the tripod that's holding the story up would be lost. The other two, in my opinion, as a reader, would be the AI Walker's flashback memories. And boy, did that really help cement the plot right there of the pre-apocalypse, as well as cement the dates. Whenever I cannot remember his name, it's the AI that we're getting the perspective of, the one that is eventually awoken.
A11?
That's it. That's it. Yeah. A11. For some reason, I wanted to say A8 for some reason, but that might be because of another association. But whenever he gave the time that he was in sleep mode was like 459 years or something like that. I'm like, wait a minute. That's when it dawned on me. And I was like, I had to go back to the prologue and I'm like, I've missed some stuff about Esther. I was like, okay, the timeline that I thought was straight is not. I'm really liking it now. So I ended up rereading a lot of Esther in the very beginning of your novel, which really, really worked great.
That's awesome. I'd love to hear that because like a common thing I hear about that. So, I mean, if you've read it, like you will know it is not a linear novel, right? The part. So it's 4 parts. Part 1 is Esther. It's an essential story. Like it is not just an essential story, it is essential to everything I'm trying to say. But it is before and just after the first apocalypse. So it's just before the second apocalypse is when Esther's part ends. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in the third book. But then, the rest of the book for a while switches between current day, like the year 2500, and the past. And it was fun it was hard, like holy shit. Like I actually, part of my editing process was I completely fucked up the timeline at one point, and I was like, oh my God, this actually doesn't make any sense. So there were like, I had to like rewrite a few chapters. I pulled out an entire character. And it was hard. Like it was a hard book to write, but yeah, so there's like kind of the present day and the past, but they converge. They should converge into these aha moments. You're like, oh my God, this character, A11, is Aleph. And yeah, like you said, like I loved writing that line. I loved writing time passed 450 years. Check for chronological anomaly. I loved it. I loved it because that was the punch you in the face. Yes, we did really just jump 450. I shouldn't say punch you in the face. It's not aggressive. I'm not aggressive like that. More like a welcoming you to the future and saying, yeah, we just did that. And then even then, like the Genesis part is prequelish because that's basically that. So you have the real prequel at the beginning, which is Esther. Then you have the current day story. Then you have Genesis, which is what happened just before the current day story, and then Convergence, which goes back to okay, now we know some crazy shit has happened. We're gonna see it through, and it was fun. Like it was hard to write, and I got really great feedback from my editor. She was awesome. I just hired her as a line editor, but she gave me some really good developmental advice on where some of those time jumps or dream jumps weren't clear. And the other thing, and I know you guys said the prologue, I'll get there eventually, but the other thing that was really helpful was originally all of my chapters were just named after the point of view. So you'd have like Baptiste Sophus. And even as the author, I was finding it really annoying finding reference points. So I asked her, I was like, do you think I should do like subtitles for my chapters? She's like, yeah, that's a great idea. It could put some context in place. So that allowed me to do things like young Philippe Baptiste, right? Which immediately, it gives you just enough of a handhold for that chapter that it makes sense, right? So that was it's amazing how much improvement happened in editing. If you are a author who is self-publishing and you have qualms about the cost of editing, honestly, like it's so great. Like to have, to have like beta readers, it can just be one or two people, but to just get any feedback. So you're not just sitting in a room smelling your own farts and thinking they're delicious. Like to have an editor who will appreciate your vision and your style, who will tell you in advance what they're going to do. So my editor was like, I follow Chicago religiously, and I'm going to try to not have you title case anything. Some very specific grammatical rules, or the way I use like end dashes. But like respecting your style so that their contribution goes beyond just line editing into truly like the developmental side. So yeah, it was amazing. And then so prologue. So the prologue is Rebecca 6. If anybody is confused as to who the prologue is describing, the prologue is I really wanted the book to open with creation. I want, again, like kind of biblical reference, open with a creation story, which will be pivotal to the rest. So, it's basically Rebecca 6 being created and not quite born yet and changing in the womb as the accelerant is injected into like the amniotic sac, and what that is doing to her and how horrible it is, but how powerful it is. And then, talking about her sisters and what she's going to be, in this notion of, maybe there's like some prophecy happening here where, this Rebecca 6 will be a prophetic character throughout the books, which she will be. But there's also some very intentional crossover between Rebecca 6 and Esther, and Rebecca 6 and Miriam, Esther's sister, that I hint at. So there's this notion of, people can infer it as they will, but there's this I won't go as far as saying reincarnation, but the spirit of Miriam may be in Rebecca 6. And there's
okay, I am following. Okay.
And there's part and parcel of the accelerant and how the numbered, so the children of the Reverend and Sisterhood who don't make it are returned to the accelerant. So there's this notion of, this kind of primordial, genetic, preternatural pool of souls and power and memories and experience that are coming together to shape the future. And yeah, as far as the writing style of the prologue, I kind of was just like, you know what? I need to let people know up front what I'm about. And the prologue is 2 pages. And if you can read those 2 pages, which are very purple, and you can enjoy them, then you're going to enjoy the book. And if you read them and you're like, fuck this, this is too abstract for me, I can't deal with this, then awesome. That, the book probably isn't for you. So yeah, it's almost like an acid test, I guess. But hopefully for some people a beautiful one.
Oh yeah, and I mean, you sold me in the prologue. So I mean, that is totally cool, man. Really, really enjoyed it. So where did the imagery itself come from? Like, did it come from a place where, of a deep-seated religious or spiritual place within yourself? Are you borrowing the imagery from the Dark Legacies? And moving beyond the prologue itself, kind of like, throughout the entire book, because I keep seeing the imagery, this blasted landscape, physics is kind of strange, and the weather is different, and not only that, but it seems like everything is alive in it. Even though it's dead, I get a sense that everything is an entity unto itself, especially the deadlands.
Yeah, that's awesome.
The topography is aware of your characters and it's reacting to them in these weird kind of subtle ways. So
yeah, I loved writing the deadlines. It was fun. It was, it's a challenge to take something that is literally nothing, literally nothing.
yeah,
It's a gray nothing, and making it interesting. And that was fun because it's all about seeing those tripods in the distance and how they're affecting you, right? It's this because it's nothing, it has a profound effect on everyone and everything that travels through it, right? Yeah, yeah. The Deadlands are an essential character in the book, and they're quite prominent in the second book as well. Yeah, sorry. So you're asking about like influences in general.
Well, before I let you go and answer the question, really quick, whatever happens to the scav Jax, who was lost in
Jax,
the
yeah.
yes, whatever happened to him, I'm really worried about him. I was kind of hoping that he was going to make a
You should be
return.
worried about him.
I know.
Yeah.
I was hoping he was going to make a return before the book was over, but he just kind of disappeared. I don't know if he went
No,
AWOL or what.
no, you don't want
So,
to get lost in the Deadlands.
no, you do not.
You really don't. Yeah, yeah. No, I'm not going to say anything more about that because
Ah, you bastard. Oh, no, you're just going to dangle it. Okay.
yeah.
Maybe he will make a return. I don't know. I don't think so. I don't know if he could or not. um, so one thing that I found really, really fascinating, and I'm kind of disappointed in myself that I missed the imagery on the cover of your book of the 8-pointed sun right here. Because I'm wondering what imagery is going to tie into the political system of Bastion, of the fortress city, especially the church class, because the Bastion group is so cool, and I love how the society is organized. I wouldn't want to live there, but from the outside,
You
I
want to
think
live
it's kind of
anywhere.
neat. Yeah,
Anywhere.
yeah, I wouldn't want to live anywhere there. So
Yeah.
I was wondering, can you break down this caste system and do each of the orders, are they represent, or sorry, I cannot talk tonight. The religious orders of the church, are they representing something in the real world or something in Dark Legacies? Is there anything deeper that's
Yeah.
going on with this? So
Yeah. I mean, the answer is probably yes to both, right? I mean, there's a great deal of biblical and religious referencing in the book,
Yeah.
and not just for the sake of it, not just because I think it's anything to do, but because this is about us. This is about people. And yes, it's in the future after tons of horrible shit has happened, but I wanted something that I've read a lot of fantasy and sci-fi, and something that can drive me crazy, not always, it depends on how it's written, is when things are too unfamiliar. Like especially if it's something like 50 years, 100 years in the future and everything is completely different. It's like, well, no, I mean, that's not how human civilization works. And this is why I love Andrew's book so much, Our Lady of the Architects, because
Oh yeah,
he has such a plausible yet still visionary way of seeing the future. Like it's the year 22 something, but it's like there's basically a new Holy Roman Empire, that's effectively dominated by the Catholic Church, and there's an Islamic Empire, and society is driven by these dominant faiths, and it's maybe not idyllic, but before things go sideways, it's sensible, right? So I thought a lot about what religions might look like in my book, and what societies might look like as a outcrop of those faiths. So there's a lot of Christian influenced fiction out there, which I find really interesting. I am Jewish, so what I wanted to do was, how do I actually impart some Judaism into the book? Like, and not necessarily, well, not even necessarily, not at all in a contemporary way or in a way that proselytizes, but how do I take this notion of a monotheistic faith that is, founded on Old Testament and project that forward? And that projection is obviously carried by the Messiah, right? So every religion has a Messiah, whether that Messiah has come or is yet to come. And it seemed very sensible to me as I was originally crafting this book that there would be a Messiah figure. And this Messiah figure would be the one responsible for setting humanity down a path. Now, there's lots we could say about the Messiah in the hand of God and its intentions and its origins. I was having a great conversation with a woman who read my book on Twitter, who's a devout Catholic, and I really wanted her opinion on some of what I had written just from that perspective. And I was like, "What do you think about the Messiah?" And she's like, "Well, it's not my Messiah." I was like, "No, it definitely is not." Right?
he's
But
not the Messiah that we wanted, the Messiah we needed for that world.
or
Yeah,
wasn't, right? So
exactly.
there's basically, no matter what happens, there will be belief. No matter what happens, there will be faith in whatever is available at the time, whatever is carried forward from the past. So the Revenant Sisterhood is the culmination of Esther's experience with the Messiah. It is a messianic religion where Esther herself has almost usurped the Messiah itself as the Messiah, right? But there's still a God. There's still an ever-present God. So it is it's basically a duality, right? Bastion is, the city in the east. So the people who went to Bastion, the people who went to Cathedral, were all originally the same people. These were the survivors of the war against hell, when Esther gathered up the remnants of humanity for this final war that wasn't won. And the people who fled to Bastion, it was a very diverse diaspora of everything, right? It's just people who would be what you would expect to be, today, but having lost their institutions of faith, having lost maybe their faith altogether, blendings of culture, things lost to just surviving for centuries, and not being able to do anything else. But eventually building up this faith of their own, that there was this promised city, Bastion, the last bastion of hope. And if they were able to restore this promised city and restore civilization in a way that they believed was holy, salvation will come. And the earth will be restored, the heavens will return, the hell will be banished. And so, again, it's a monotheistic system, but I actually took a lot of cues from Eastern Orthodox when I built the church. And again, there's some numerological things in there. So the seven orders of the church, the number 7 is ever present in all faiths. Whether it's 7 angels, there's paganism, there's all kinds of things that use the number 7.
Ecumenical councils and stuff like that. The 7 ecumenical, yeah.
And so I had this notion of, again, this is not a homogenous blob of people. The people who went to Bastion were from all across North America. They would have been the last survivors. So they would have brought bits and pieces, and there would have been a very strong military function as necessary to survive. So, there's the order militant, and then, there's the order pastoral, which is the main kind of order that services the people. And then, okay, well, what about heresy? So there's the order sacramental, and then there's the order occult, because this is a world that is adjacent to hell. There are demons. They are real. So it makes sense that there would be a order within the church that would be focused, perhaps to a dangerous degree, on the occult, on this realm, on this aspect of existence. And then there's the order prophetic, which keeps intact the path towards salvation. And then the order hermetic, which is the knowledge keepers. And then a big one is the order somatic, and they're almost like the clerics. So something that I did want to keep in the books was just a little bit of those traditional fantasy archetypes. So there are paladins, but the paladins are soldiers. One of my favorite posts on Twitter is like, wait a minute. There's guns in your fantasy book? This was after I entered SPFBO, right? And I was like, yeah, but there's paladins wielding the guns. It's like, but aren't they driving around in like APCs? It's like, well, yeah, because there's no horses. Why aren't there any horses? Well, because it's the apocalypse. You mean this is Earth? So it's just like this funny thing. But
that is hilarious.
I wanted kind of this notion of clerics, right? And that's where the chaplains come in, the order somatic priests. So there's a little bit of those fantasy tropes just baked slightly into the church, and it's really fun. I go a lot into the order occult in book 2, and the order sacramental. So the fun thing, book 2 is very different from book 1, but the fun thing is now that I've set the stage, I can really deep dive into a couple places at least. And then there's the triarchy. So it's the church, the legion, and parliament. And because nobody likes politicians, parliament will always be the bit player. And I'm never going to give them any love because fuck them.
Good. Yeah.
And the legion is the legion because prior to founding the city, they would have been like an external military. They would have been legions. They would have been various militias or armies that came together, and then they formed this military order. So there's this play between the 3 members of the triarchy, but the 2 dominant players are the legion and the church. And Baptiste represents a little bit of the friction there, because everybody in Bastion is religious. Everybody in Bastion is a believer, because of course they are. I mean, there's been 2 apocalypses, there's demons, they've been steeped in this. They live in this, even though, as with the original Dark Legacies, there's no explicit proof of God. But what Baptiste represents is this spirituality, while also pushing back against institutional religion. So, I wanted a little bit of that just to represent how spirituality can evolve, and how it's not necessarily entrenched in institutions or buildings or high priests or anything like that. It can exist in its own way, and is changed in that. So Baptiste is kind of the representing a little bit of what overall the Legion represents as this sort of secular branch of government, but they're still in it for God. They're still holy warriors, right? Despite not being the priesthood. So I guess that's it's my long rambling dissertation on Bastion.
Oh man, I love it. Is there some significance behind his name?
I didn't. I mean, that's
okay.
super interesting. And there are definitely specific names
Miriam,
that are there for
Rebecca,
a reason.
yeah.
But not him. It felt right, because it's John the Baptist, like Baptiste, like it's a real name. It can be a first name. It can be a surname, and names have blended somewhat in this future because of the state of the world. But no, it was more to add like a little bit of that religious flavor, and to, I mean, what he's, maybe it's a bit cheesy, but what he's effectively going through is a bit of a baptism, right? Like he has absolutely been through hell and back. It's actually not even back. He's still kind of in hell by the end of the book. So, it's kind of the process of that. And, baptism is, kind of a recurring theme throughout the book.
What I like about his character is you didn't make him a superhero, because so far, well, I mean, in the book, I mean, he hasn't saved the day. He shows up, and the action is either, so the action is either initiated by someone else, or the precipitating action has already happened before he even gets there. Yeah. And so what I like about his character is, he was a very relatable character. I mean, he just finds himself in the middle of, okay, I have this mission to go meet some scavs. I'm going to a bunker. We have to open up the bunker. And he doesn't even make it back to a city, and events have already moved beyond what his original mission was. And I really like that aspect of it.
I love that. I love that you picked that up. He is like, exactly. He is like the people in this book, whether or not they have supernatural powers, are just people, and people all have similar experiences. And I really wanted to tell the story of people and suffering. And, Baptiste has a hard time. Like, he lost his whole family. His great uncle is a bastard. He is trying his best, but he is self-conscious about, people treating him better than they should because of his familial relationship with the Lord Commander of the Legion. He's like, he's just self-conscious. He's suffering from this brutal insomnia, this growing loss of self, as he is unable to sleep. Loss of control. I mean, loss of control is part of life. We know that as parents. And, there's a funny part. I mean, I don't know if I should say this. Maybe this makes me seem like a terrible author, but near the end of the book, I won't say it exactly, just in case somebody's watching this who hasn't read it yet, but there's this part of the book where I write, Baptiste had no idea what to do. During a fairly pivotal scene where he should have known what to do. And the reason I wrote that is because I wrote the scene and I get very deep into my POVs. I wrote the scene and I put myself into Baptiste. And I didn't know what to do as the author. So literally, he didn't know what to do, right? The situation was out of hand. It had happened in a way that was out of his control. There was no way out at that point. And it's kind of a fun like meta thing, right? To um, to do that. I mean, I'm very close to Baptiste in general. So last spring, when I was writing, the book, like full blast, I was having a bit of health trouble, and I ended up having extreme insomnia. I basically didn't sleep for 6 weeks, and I felt like I was losing my mind. Like it was very, very, very bad and scary and physically damaging, mentally damaging, and it took like a lot of work to get out of that. Like it was I was like in the pit of my life, um, and I tried even in the midst of that. Part of me, a very small part of me, that was able to not just be feeling sorry for itself, was like, you should use this. And so when I was writing Baptiste, and I was writing about how fucking tired he was, and his waking nightmares, and his hallucinations, and his pain, and this went into Sophus as well, but Sophus is more about just the horrors of aging, which I also know a lot about. But Baptiste was really about psychological degradation, and I was living it, and so I wrote most of him while I was living that. So it's interesting. Like I think some people like so far people mostly love Rebecca 6, A11, you know, Esther, and they may gloss over Baptiste, but I would say show him some love, because Baptiste has suffered uh, genuinely, and I think he's a critical character in the story.
That's fascinating. So you suffered from insomnia. That actually makes sense. Oh my gosh, yeah. And as a matter of fact, now that I think about it, when I listened to the podcast with Offer, I want to say that I can't remember who asked you that, but one of them did. One of his guest hosts, I think, they asked you about the insomnia in his character. Brill, it's wonderfully written. I'm sorry that you had to go through that to bring us those words, but
Yeah,
we're gonna need
yeah.
more. We're
It's
gonna need
the
more. I'm
whole.
sorry. You're gonna have to not sleep again.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
like there's been some funny posts on Twitter lately where people are irritated because you know how Twitter is. It's like something comes up and then everybody's like, "Oh, that's so
Oh
dumb."
God, I know.
It'll
Yeah.
take whatever. But something that came up, which was kind of a funny question, is this question that agents sometimes ask, which was, "Why did you write the book, or why were you the right person to write the book?" And yeah, like whatever. It's a maybe a stupid question, but I could not have written this book if I had not personally suffered, seen my family suffer, like my wife suffer, having children, like it's interesting to think about the when authors the age that authors write their books, um and why. I mean, a lot of people wait to write their books just because they're busy. I mean, who has time to write a book, right? But I do think that there is a case for, you know you have a threshold of life experiences that cannot be kept inside anymore, and they inform your creativity and your story and your characters, and that's how you have characters that are real. and that's definitely been the case for me. So yeah, it's a very like an extremely personal book. There's a there's the bit with Esther and Miriam at the beginning, and again, I know that we expect some people who've watched this to have read the book, but I'll try not to purposely spoil. But so Esther and Miriam are based somewhat on my own kids, and I have seen them at the different ages, and parts of how they've been at those ages are locked in my mind. So I was able to write, you know, Esther as an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old and Miriam as a 5-year-old in a way that I think is realistic. But there's that part with Miriam, and my wife was so mad at me. She was like, "Fuck you, fuck this. I'm not reading the rest of this book." And I was like, I knew it was coming. I knew it was coming because when like she knew I literally use some dialogue that my kids use, like the way that they're
Oh
playing
wow, yeah.
together and stuff, right? Because it's real. Not just because it was easy, but because it's real and I see other kids doing it. It's like when you see a red car and then all you see are red cars, right? Or you think of a red car. It's like kids, have these qualities and these behaviors and these interactions and these sibling rivalries that, tend to be the same. And so I used those, and it was hard. And the first bunch of times I wrote and edited and rewrote that scene was very hard for me. Like I was on the verge of tears myself. Um, so yeah, it's a highly, highly personalized novel, but hopefully not just a conceited one. Like I'm not writing myself into the book like some big dicked hero, right? The
Yeah.
components of my life and the life that I've lived are what I've written into the book. So it probably sounds super dramatic, but it feels dramatic. It feels real, right?
Well, that kind of reminds me something that Dr. Jeff Kripal told me whenever I was interviewing him for his book, The Superhumanities. And he said, Frank, and he said, I don't take any philosopher now serious unless they've had kids. And at first I was like, hard. But then he started to systematically break down what he said and why he said it in the way of a very gifted academic. And what he told me is, and he says, look, and he goes, until someone has seen a human being born, until
Mhm.
they've been wrapped up in keeping that human being safe and alive and nurturing them, until they've lost sleep, you're getting up at night with them, until you've suffered with them. And he says, what do they really know about being a human being?
Yeah.
And I can see writers who have, and this is nothing against them, and none of my guests are awesome. All of you who have been on the Labyrinth, this does not apply to you, or who I've asked you to come on, it doesn't apply to you. Which I would never have a guest on that I wouldn't be willing to leave them a 5-star review, which I like to remind our viewers that they can do for Yuval Kordov. Leave him a 5-star review after you buy his book. Don't pirate it,
Yep.
despite
Do it.
whatever that. Yeah, that's right. But um, I've read some books and I'm like, okay, this person, you've never really seen a dead body. Like you've never been called out at night. Okay, the police officer is knocking on your door to let you know that so and so has died. I can tell this has never happened to you at all, and you don't know anyone this has ever happened to. And I work in law enforcement, and I can tell immediately whether or not an
Mm.
author has been exposed to it because there's so many tropes in their writing, or they have this melodrama that just doesn't exist in law enforcement. And kids are going to be one of the major cuts because I think about what Jeff Kripal said and everything that you're saying. I could never write a character that was suffering from any form of insomnia. I've never experienced it. Luckily, I can catnap whenever I need to. I mean, I can pretty much
You're a
sleep.
bastard.
That's right. But But yeah, actually living through something and the suffering and coming out on the other end of it, it adds a level of dimension and just really street cred. It's really just street cred, man, because um, a reader might not be able to articulate why they are experiencing the truth, but they know it.
Yeah.
Like if I go to an orchestra, I can't tell you, hey, the cello in section 2 quit playing, but I can tell that something's off with it. Hey, there's something not quite going on with the music. But
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess it's we can do what we can do. People have the experiences that they have, and I hope that readers from different backgrounds and different experiences with different tastes can all find something that rings true for them, right? Because we're all people, and that's really just what it's about. I don't look for throwaway scenes. So everything is rooted in the real.
I think I hear a little person in the background. At
Oh, do
first, I
you?
was like, "Is that
Yeah,
mine or is that yours?" I
yeah,
don't
no.
know.
Oh, they're up past their bedtime. I asked them to be quiet. They're like, "Oh, you're gonna be on YouTube? Are you famous?" I'm like, no, I'm not famous. Like, can you watch this film? Depends on how much I swear. I might let you watch it.
I don't know if you're going to be famous on my YouTube channel, although I would have no objection to it if this video would go viral. No objection whatsoever. I would like to squeeze in two other questions,
Yeah,
and we
sure.
can keep them concise so we can move on. But and this is just me. This is just Frank Shumpert's wondering. So it seems like you're leaving it a bit of a mystery about what fully happened to humanity to bring about the apocalypse. But especially at chapter A11, Just a Soldier, we get a glimpse of some pretty disturbing AI. Already towards the end of your book, we see the AI system isn't perfect. With that being said, does the AI in your story have a quote soul? And do you think that if AI in our timeline here, if it continues to get scaled up, could we be facing the hand of God event? What do you think? So
Yeah,
really two kind
that's a
of
good
questions.
question. So
Yeah.
it's funny. So it's not Terminator. So the I won't go into detail because I won't go into detail, but the reason for World War III in the book had actually nothing to do with AIs. It's about people, right? It's about human division. Esther says in the book, how is it that people came to loathe each other so much that they created these artificial facsimiles of themselves for comfort, right? So this is when she's in this old machine shop,
Yeah, that's
after
right. Oh, yeah,
the
yeah.
bombs have dropped, and this machine shop is effectively a recycling factory for old synths, um, that people have created, companion bots, sex bots, pets, all these things, right? And so division is why the world ends. There is I mean, it's no different than today. People are infinitely segregated behind their opinions, right? There's almost no common ground anymore on anything, and so that's a factor in my writing. And I'm not going to go into it in detail. Like I have I have some outlines for book 3 that will show a bit more of the past, but I'm never going to have like Dark Legacies, the prequel, and these are the exact events that led up to it. But in A11's chapter, something that's hinted at, and something that's hinted at when Sophus first sees, when the Scavrats first see the scrolls, is Central States of America. So there is a civil war in the book, and the um, the collapse of the United States is fairly instrumental in the ending of the world, which I think it would be because it's very much a stabilizing force. Well, I mean, that's a big comment. Stabilizing may not be the right word. It's a anchoring force in the world, whichever way the boat above the anchor sways. So that's about as much as I drop, right? Is a degeneration of humanity, and humanity's love for each other and tolerance for each other, and the outcome of that. And then A11 is what I think is a natural thing that probably already exists, which is a artificial intelligence war machine, right? Although now our artificial intelligence, their AIs are just writing our books and making our music and making our movies, but it always comes back to war, war and porn. That's a technology. That's where technology is bred, right? So his character, its character, has all of these little thoughts. You know, it's a sort of, it's not quite a general intelligence, but it's getting there because it has so much processing power. It has so much data, but also there's a bit in there that being sculpted by violence and war and death is another kind of a baptism of fire that is ushering consciousness from this war intelligence, right? And that's that goes further when A11 gets the data set and is just interred underground for hundreds of years and has no choice but to think and to process and to look and to lay out conjectures and to deduce and so on and so forth. So it's an interesting character. Like A11 is a psychopath, but also a sympathetic psychopath. Like it's trying to be conscious, and then has its conversion and is trying to be important, and wants its platoon, wants its brothers, wants to save the world, wants to be perfect, wants to replicate perfection. So there's malevolence there, but not evil, right? So A11's an interesting character. I like it a lot.
One of the most unsettling scenes in the book was when A11 became conscious of the fact that he was trapped in the bunker and the darkness is wrapping around him, but he can still he's still aware of his platoon mates and his squad mates, and they're reaching out to him like, what do we do, boss? Boss, we need some orders. What is going on right now? And he can't help them, and they just end up going mad and kind of shutting down. And yeah, I mean, that was gut wrenching. And it's like this AI was just left on, just left on the face, the darkness by itself. And what simulation would it come up to entertain itself? I mean, it's I was just kind of running all these scenarios through my mind in that. What a sad thing. It's here's humanity's child in some way. It's
buried alive.
Yeah, right? That's right. Yeah, buried alive. And I mean, like an artifact, just, yeah.
Yeah, Duckling Mode is funny. I remember when Elle was reading my book for Offers podcast, and
oh yeah,
Duckling Mode ended up being her most tear-jerking chapter, which is awesome. I mean, it's fun. It's just, I love it. What creator doesn't love when somebody appreciates something that they've done? But again, in the same way the Deadlands was hard, to create empathy towards this to create empathy towards an AI war machine as it's pondering its own non-existence. It was difficult. And I love that it landed. It makes me feel it's just, if nothing else, it just makes me feel that alone makes me feel accomplished, right? Just these little things, these little vignettes that just worked and they landed, and the message was delivered. It's awesome.
Very, very well deserved. And so I have two more questions after that one
Yeah.
question that turned into two questions. When you first started to write The Hand of God, was this something that you outlined? Were you page one and chapter one, or how did you fit it all like together?
Yeah, so I started in the middle. My first
Awesome. Okay.
chapter, my first chapter was Baptiste's first chapter. So that first part where he is in the metro and he's tired as shit. You don't know why yet, and he's summoned for the meeting of the Lord Commander. So I wrote Baptiste and Sophis first because I had this notion of this meeting and the Deadlands. The Deadlands were also originally in Dark Legacies from 20 years ago, and the bunker. But yeah, I outline a lot. So I have, dozens of Apple notes, and I'll have a note for like a timeline note, overall plot. I'll have a note for each POV. And then what I do is I bullet point the chapters. In some cases, I've bullet pointed like a dozen list items. In other cases, I have like 100 or more. And the ideas. I mean, this is the creator versus conduit conversation. I don't know where they come from sometimes, but yeah. So effectively, I was building. I had characters. I started with characters and themes and places and ideas of interactions, ideas of very high level important things like the Hellmouth and uh, could humanity be saved and the Messiah and stuff, and then eventually plots just happened. But yeah, so I will have a POV note, and each of their chapters is bullet pointed. And I know when I'm getting stuck in a book. So if I'm writing and I'm like, oh fuck, what should I do next? I know it's because I haven't planned enough. And it doesn't mean that I have planned entirely, because I have sometimes let my characters do things they weren't supposed to do, and then I had to rethink everything. But in those cases where I'm stuck, it's like, well, of course I'm stuck. I haven't actually thought through what's going to happen or what this means, because this isn't just a first person story about a person's life that doesn't affect anybody else. This is a extremely interwoven narrative over 3 books that has to make sense. And I have to make sure that even if I'm letting people do things I didn't plan on them to do at first, I can't write myself into a corner. I'm fucked. So yeah, I do a lot of bullet pointing. I do a lot of walks, and walking is where all the magic happens. And I just try to empty myself, and solutions appear, connections appear. It's almost like, what's funny about AI and technology is I often feel like our brains, having this as a backward statement, that our brains work similar to how like machine learning works. So basically machine learning works like how our brains work, where I have this massive data in my head and I'll filter down the data a little bit to parts that are important. And then I'll just go for a walk. And I'm going to let the machine learning model in my head make some assertions. It's going to classify some of my questions and give me answers. And I don't necessarily know how I came to those answers. So it's this funny like background processing thing that happens. I mean, muse, like God speaking through you, however you want to approach it, like that is real. Like it's walking, having a shower, taking a shit. Like it's not sitting and writing where my best ideas happen. It's like when I'm just a piece of meat with an empty head. So it's yes, I plan, yes, I plot, but I am very dependent on these emergent thoughts that just, and sometimes something will appear in my head on a walk, and I'm like, wow, that links up to this what I thought was a random thing that I thought of, this random scene or this random vignette from like months ago or a year ago, and or something that I'm like, wow, that's how like I'm gonna do this in book 3. So I write it down on my phone. Um, yeah, it's the writing process is weird. It's a weird process.
Man, that is fascinating. You see, this is kind of the meat and bones of Reader's Labyrinth. Like, I love just kind of listening to the process, learning where these ideas come from. And every single guest on here has had a different answer to it, which is lovely. I love that. It just goes to show the diverse nature of creativity. So that's really, really cool. So if you had to be any character in your story, who would it
Oh
be?
god.
You had to be. You cannot escape this. Baptiste, I think we can rule him out because I don't know if you want another bout of not being
Yeah.
able to rest.
I would say the maybe I would reposition your question and say the character I'm probably closest to being would be like Sophus in terms of his like physical,
Okay,
you
yeah,
know, like,
yeah.
and his I mean, my kids are still little. I mean, I've fucked up plenty, but hopefully not so much that, my relationship with my daughters is as broken as Sophus is with Julia. But it's there, right? It's that fear of distance and pushing away is there. Um, yeah, I don't know, man. Like, I mean, there's a bit of me in all of them. Would I want to be any of them? I mean, I'm not any of them. They're real people, and I'm just writing their story.
What a great answer, too. They are real people, and you're just writing their story. And who are we to say that they're not real on some other plane of existence? The universe is a
Exactly.
strange place. It is a weird place. I'm glad to be in it. Well, Yuval, I think we have covered a lot of ground, my man.
That's awesome.
Yes, I really, really enjoyed it. I am going to work on getting this up as soon as possible. Before we close out, is there anything you would like to let your readers, my listeners, and viewers know?
Well, book 2 is done. I'm editing it right now, and as I mentioned at the beginning of the show, the cover is in progress. So hopefully, I have a cover reveal soon. And what else? Yeah, that's about it. Just if it's a cliche thing to say, but if you have read it and you liked it and you haven't yet left a review, please do, because it's hard as an indie author to make it through the algorithm, to make it through the masses, and tell people about it. I love that you told your brother about it. It's great, but at the same time, it's not going to be for everybody, so that's also fine. But yeah, I just for everybody who has read it, who's given it a chance, I really, really appreciate you. And I hope, like I was saying earlier, that there was something in there that landed and felt real.
Well, it certainly landed for me, and it feels very, very real. And again, this is The Hand of God for all my listeners and viewers. If you can't see it because you're listening to the podcast, I'm holding it up, which the thumbnail will have some art on it too, so you can see it. Yuval, thank you for stopping by. You have
Thank you,
a
sir.
wonderful rest of your evening.